Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we are reviewing Deadpool 2, and if you guys missed it, we already reviewed Deadpool 1 earlier this week. We'll link it up there. This review is going to be spoiler-free, but we are going to talk a few spoilers at the end because there are some things we want to talk about. And so we can just jump right in.
So let's dive into the plot without revealing details. Compared to the first one, this plot was not my favorite.
I didn't mind the plot as much. It was a little bit almost like more focused, but simultaneously less focused. It was weird.
I just found it to be pretty unoriginal, and I think it borrowed from a lot of previously done films, which nowadays it's kind of hard not to do that just because everything's kind of been done, especially when it comes to a superhero action movie. But I don't know, I just found that this had a lot more like tropes when it came to plot and characters and such, and that bothered me a little bit because I felt like the first one was very original.
Yeah, I felt like even the parts of the original that were a little tropey, the film managed to be kind of meta about it and be commentary on those things, whereas it felt like this movie had a lot less commentary in its plot.
There were commentary pieces, and those parts were funny. Like, they put a tropey part in and then made a funny joke about it. Like, that's fine with me. But there were plenty of instances in this movie where they didn't use it as joke material. It was just actually part of the plot. And I just didn't like it.
I mean, that's true. I think I enjoyed the movie quite a bit more than she did.
I fluctuated between loving and hating this movie, the entire movie. It was the strangest thing, because I was laughing so much during this movie, but there were a lot of things I didn't like about it. So I'm like in a weird in-between area for this one.
But while pretty derivative, I think the plot did a good job of carrying the characters through. I went in with pretty low expectations. I wanted to see Deadpool and I wanted to laugh, and those things happened for me. And I did really like some parts of the plot, especially I think all the plot regarding Cable was very strong. But I think there were some other parts of the plot that didn't always quite fit. Like, I wasn't sure why it was there to begin with, than just to be there.
So let's kick off talking about specific characters, and we'll start again with Deadpool. I think Ryan Reynolds again killed it in this role. I literally have no issues with his performance in this movie. I think it's great. I think he plays Deadpool perfectly. No complaints.
Yeah, I think he did a great job. I think the standout character for me, though, was Domino in this film.
Domino is great. I love her. Can she have her own movie? That'd be nice.
I'd be okay with that. I just love she showed up and they're like, your power's not very cinematic, and cue just tons of cinematic awesomeness, and I think she was really enjoyable. She had a lot of personality, I felt like, on screen. We didn't get a lot of her backstory, per se, not to spoil anything, but I think you do get a lot of her character, and she's one of the most fun parts of this film.
Can we talk about how that actress's name is Zazie Beetz? I love it. We also have Cable in this film. Now, I am not very familiar with the Deadpool comics, but for how he was presented in the film with my very little previous knowledge, I mean, I liked Cable's character. I really didn't have that much of an issue with him. I had some issues with some of the plot surrounding his character and how he came into Deadpool's realm and everything, but we'll talk about that in the spoiler section. But other than that, Cable in and of himself I thought was really cool. The physical effects on Cable I think were my favorite part of this film. They were just excellently done.
There was also a slew of different characters, some in the trailer, some without, that I don't want to spoil anything because there were some like surprise appearances by people.
The cameos in this movie are insane. I'll say that.
That is true. The higher budget did get a lot more people to show up, and I really enjoyed the moments when they did.
The cameos I very much enjoyed. I do have some issues around a few of them, but they're more plot focused than like the actual characters and cameo actors.
Yeah, without mentioning specific characters, there were a lot of characters in this film that were handled interestingly.
They were wasted.
Yeah, so like some people felt wasted or underutilized, or like they didn't need to be there. There's a lot of filler characters in this film, which surprised me.
Yeah, a lot of things in this movie, characters in particular, were thrown in just for a joke. Like one or two, and then like they weren't used again. And I just, why introduce so much to just, I don't know. I didn't like it.
I mean, they would spend like 5 minutes setting up a character, only for like a joke.
Yeah.
That lasts like 2 seconds, and you're like, that was a lot of work the
it
movie
wasn't
put
enough
in.
payoff
Yeah.
for the build-up in a lot of
Mhm.
circumstances, and I think that exists outside of some cameo characters that we have as well. That happened in a few other jokes as well. It was strange. So let's talk about one of my biggest issues with this entire movie. So I felt like the first movie had some really cool, strong female characters. It is a male-driven character movie. I don't have any, weird opinions about that. Like, that's fine. But we did have some really cool, strong female characters in the first one. And this movie, besides Domino, the female characters in this film are just plot devices. They're there to further the plot only. They don't have their own arcs, and some characters were only put in for jokes again. And so I was just really disappointed by that. That kind of goes back to the whole Hollywood tropes that I mentioned earlier that seem to be a lot more present in this film. I just expected it to be more balanced. The first movie I did not feel like was a boys' club, and this movie I very much did feel like it was more of a boys' club. Again, that is my opinion. A lot of different people may feel differently.
So the tone of this movie is pretty interesting because I feel like, for me, it was actually closer to the Deadpool that I want in tone than the first film.
Interesting.
So I felt like sometimes Deadpool gets a little too random for me, and my preference for Deadpool is when it's a little darker. So there's humor in there and all the funny stuff, but there's also a lot of darkness. And there's a couple scenes that I really liked and felt like they portrayed that well in this film. But the tone does move around a little bit, where like sometimes they get a little too funny for too long, and then sometimes they're a little dark for too long, instead of having it be like balanced throughout.
Along with that, another thing I felt was a little more imbalanced than the first film was the humor. Something I mentioned in our review of the first film is that it hit my humor box pretty well for something that's rated R and raunchy, because I tend to not like when jokes go too far down the dirty scale, or those jokes that just take it too far for the sake of taking it too far. Those are not my favorite, and I felt like the first film stayed within my preferred bubble of that. This film went very outside of that bubble in a lot of different circumstances, and while I don't think that necessarily like detracts from the movie, especially for other people, like, again, that's my personal taste in humor, but this is our review and our opinion, so there you go.
Yeah, I would say, I think for the majority of the film, everything landed for me with the humor, but there were a few scenes that even for me, like subjectively, the jokes either went on too long or it was a little too much.
And I will say, in our theater, we went opening night. It was a packed theater. It's a 21 and up movie theater that we go to, so there's no kids or anything. And I noticed that there were several parts where, like, you can tell the way they wrote it in, it was supposed to get a bunch of laughs, and literally no one in our theater laughed. Granted, that was only 2 or 3 instances, and it was smaller jokes. It wasn't even any of the big hitter jokes, but I just thought that was interesting because that's not something I remember happening in the first film.
I do feel like almost every single joke from Deadpool 1 like lands.
Agreed.
And meets a good middle ground. Whereas I felt like this one's a little riskier with its comedy, sometimes going far off in a direction that doesn't always land for us, and I'm sure there's other parts that might not have landed for other people.
Well, and I think plenty of people are going to think this landed perfectly. Again, this is our opinion.
I think one of the biggest improvements in Deadpool 2 over Deadpool 1 is the fight scenes.
Now, this is something I agree with.
Visually and choreography is so much better in this film than the first one, where you actually get to see these fight scenes. They're willing to spend some time on them. I think the first meeting of Deadpool and Cable is one of the coolest parts of the movie for me, because they give it the time, and it's very cool. And throughout the film, the visuals were very great in all the fight scenes.
So director-wise, Tim Miller was the one who directed the first Deadpool, and I think he did an excellent job with it. Unfortunately, he stepped down from this project because he had creative differences with Ryan Reynolds. Tim Miller wanted to keep it lower budget and much closer to the vibe of the first film, and I think Ryan was going for more of the bigger budget, and also other people involved on the film were as well. And I think that the absence of Tim Miller was felt in this movie for me personally. I definitely felt the change in direction style between the first film and this film. I wouldn't say it's insanely drastic, but it's there.
I felt like the soundtrack throughout the movie, though, was well done. I think the use of the Celine Dion song was really good, and it worked. It worked for me throughout the film. I thought it was placed well, and all the moments were good. I enjoyed it.
So overall, I think we have differing opinions on this film.
Yeah.
Steven enjoyed it. I fluctuated between enjoying it and not enjoying it. We don't usually give rankings, like letter rankings for our films, but I think I would give this like a C.
And I gave it more of a B. I said, like, I just overall steadily enjoyed the film, besides a few potholes here and there, whereas you actually were like, I hate it. I love it. I hate it. Well, that wraps up our spoiler-free review. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to subscribe to our channel. We have a lot of different reviews. Check those out. And leave if you haven't seen this film yet, because we are going to talk spoilers for a few minutes. So this is your warning, and let's go.
Okay, so let's talk about the female characters a little bit more of a deep dive, because this is a very big piece of the movie. Morena Baccarin's character dies in the first, 5 minutes. I hated that writing choice. I think it was stupid. I was waiting for it to not be real the entire movie, and I very much have an issue with the fact that they built up her character so much in the first film, and then they just use her as the stupid, typical, wife, girlfriend, significant other that is female needs to die for the male character to have, heartbreak and then move forward. And also, Cable had the same exact storyline. His wife and child dies, so then he's inspired to go do all these things. It's just something I'm very tired of in Hollywood, and also, any media.
I mean, with those Hollywood tropes, it is such a trope that the only way that the character can be motivated for personal growth is to kill the female that he is in love with. It's very much why not just have them break up? Or have her just get hurt? Or have it not be related to her at all? But regardless, yeah. I felt like her character was pretty wasted. I thought it was very interesting that Negasonic Teenage Warhead character actually had less lines of dialogue than the first movie.
She was nothing in this film, and her girlfriend that they put in was just a Japanese stereotype of the happy anime character. And her powers were so cool, and we spent no time on her.
So for a popular character from the first film, it's odd that they basically get shoved into the background, and it's not it's because they wouldn't have had opportunities. She was there in a lot of scenes where they just didn't give her dialogue, or they decided her dialogue was humph.
Yeah.
Why not just give her a fun little line, something funny? And she did have a few, but
they were very watered down.
All of the females felt very underutilized. Even one of my favorite characters, Domino, was you don't really learn any of her backstory, and she's there mostly as the quit machine.
She was strong in comparison to the other female characters in this film, but in comparison to other films with very strong superhero female characters, I agree she was a touch watered down, but in comparison, she felt like a strong character in this movie.
I said in our Deadpool 1 review that I was actually very excited for X-Force, because X-Force is a really cool thing.
And then it's not a really cool thing.
And then this movie, this is one of those moments I felt was wasted in the film, because they spent a lot of time in the marketing and in the film setting up X-Force, and I understand it's for a gag, and they murder them all, and all except for Domino, in the span of 3 minutes. They all just die.
Which I did not know that Bill Skarsgård was in this, and I got very excited when he was in here. I was like, yes! And then within 5 minutes he's gone, and he had very little dialogue. I'm like, why the F would you get Bill Skarsgård and then just completely waste him? It bothered me so much.
So it was one of those things that, why would you spend time to film? They probably could have cut all of the X-Force out of the film and just had Domino show up, and it actually probably would have made it a better paced movie.
Agreed.
Instead of, and you could have saved X-Force for an actual, deserving entry to it.
The only fun thing I liked about X-Force is the Brad Pitt cameo.
That is true.
That was pretty funny. See, I think they could have had X-Force, and I think they still could have killed off a few of them dramatically and still had the gag. So I think you could have had the alien guy, I forget his name, die, and then you could have had the Invisible Man, Brad Pitt, die. And that would have been funny, but keep the other ones. Or maybe even kill Terry Crews. I don't know.
Or, kill them as you go, but literally in a 2-minute scene, they're, dead.
Well, and after the second or third one, you're like, oh, I see what's happening. And so you see it coming, and then the joke's over. It was too played out.
And that, yeah, the joke's passed, but you're still having to watch another 30 seconds of people just die, and it's like, oh.
So, something that has been up for an immense debate the past few days is the mid-credit scene. So there's 2 mid-credit scenes in the end of this film, which I hope you've seen them because you should have watched the movie before watching this part. But there is a sequence where Deadpool goes back and ends up, like, fixing the timeline, where he goes back and, like, kills himself in Wolverine Origins and, like, does all these funny things, kills himself before he can, like, make Green Lantern, all that kind of stuff. It's hilarious. But he also makes it to where the X-Force, at least Peter, lives. And then he also makes it to where his girlfriend lives. So the debate is this canon or not canon?
Is Vanessa alive? I think it is very like this movie, even though it makes the movie pointless. I think it may be canon.
I will be significantly upset if this is canon. I don't think it's canon. I think it's a funny gag as an end-credit scene. But if it's canon, like, I'll be glad that Vanessa's back. But I like emotional manipulation in films to a certain degree. I think it's good for, you know, to pull on the audience's heartstrings. But this level of emotional manipulation, if this is in fact canon, is unacceptable in my opinion.
I'm not that upset about it.
I am.
But if it ends up being canon, I feel like it's just a waste opportunity, which I think her character and that plot was kind of a missed mark anyways, because if you were going to have them use the time travel to revive, why wouldn't you just put that into the plot? Why? And spoilers, when Cable decides to slipstream back, why go back and save Deadpool's life when you could literally go back and save her life?
I think that would have been a much better writing decision if this does in fact end up being canon. While that is pretty tropey of a time travel movie, they were already doing time travel tropes, so why not just continue it? I would have much preferred them to just go back. And while it still would have upset me that it makes the whole movie moot, like it's dumb, then I would have preferred that over this end credit scene if it ends up being canon. We shall see.
Yeah, we'll find out.
So if you've seen Deadpool 2, let us know your opinion about the mid-credit scene. Do you think it's canon? Do you think it's not? From some polls I've seen going around on Twitter, it seems to be like 75% of people think it's canon, or like 60 to 75%, so we'll see. So that wraps up our thoughts on Deadpool 2, spoiler and non-spoiler. Let us know your opinions, because I'm thinking this is a little bit of a divisive film so far. I've seen people falling in both camps, which I assumed when we walked out of the theater that I would have a very different opinion from most everybody else. And then I saw some of our buddies on Twitter who had the same opinions of me, and I was like, yes, my people. So, let us know what you thought of it.
Like we said earlier, guys, please subscribe to the channel. We love seeing you guys watch our videos. And we love making videos for you guys, and we have a ton of them up for you. And if you want to check some of those out, you guys can click right over there, and we'll see you next time.